All right, hello and welcome to our first virtual edition of our upfront sort of chats. We haven't come up with a name for it quite yet, but we're going to have plenty of these conversations with some of my friends, some guys I play baseball with. And first, we're going to give it to my former VP at Stony Brook Club Baseball, the one of the best, well, the best assistant coach I had because I haven't had any before. We got Mike Giganti joining the Upfront podcast. Mike, how are things going today?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing good. We'll talk a little baseball here, and we'll start with of course, your favorite team, the New York Yankees. And I know as a Mets fan, we want to try to poach DJ LeMahieu away from you guys. I know for the Yankees, you want him to stay. Do you think DJ is a guy that the Yankees could even replace if not just the Mets, if another team took him away?
No. Like he's their most valuable player, like from 19 and last year. Um, if any team got him over the Yankees, it would just I don't know. I don't know what I would do honestly. I would be so disappointed with that. Like they need him. He's their number one priority for the offseason. Like if he wants 5 years, like you gotta give it to him. Like just give him like 5 years, 100 million, player option, something. But like he has to come back, and I think he will.
Yeah, and so the Yankees, yeah, they put a lot of money with Garrett Cole. They have LeMahieu. So do you think uh, at least for me, if I look at the Yankees, I would say if you miss out on LeMahieu, I would think your your advancement towards getting a guy like Lindor to play shortstop, maybe you move Glaber to second to fill that void. I think that certainly becomes a possibility for the Yankees, at least if they don't get LeMahieu.
Yeah, that's like definitely like their next option, like exploring wise, like because Torres is not fit for shortstop. Like we saw it in like the 60 game season, and like his arm is just like throwing the ball all over the place. His glove is like mediocre, and his range is just like worse than Jeter's, honestly. So
That's one of the odd things too, because like when he got that Tommy John surgery, right, it was on his non-throwing elbow, I
yeah, his
believe.
glove arm, yeah, his glove side.
So his non-throwing arm, and he's had so many issues. Plus, not to forget, the Yankees still have Andujar in the system. Of course, you have Urshela at third base. So, and obviously Luke Voigt's not going to go anywhere. That guy is pretty much your staple at first base. So I think when you look at that Yankees lineup, you're right where they need LeMahieu because the Yankees they have Stanton, they have Judge, they have Voigt. All these guys hit a lot of home runs. The power is great, but LeMahieu is the only guy in that lineup who is a 300 hitter who's not going to strike out, and
Yeah.
he's probably the best defender you're going to have at three different positions that he can play in the infield.
Yeah, besides like third base, like Gio has that lockdown. And Gio is like probably the only other hitter in that lineup who's more like bat the ball than like just hitting home runs. So like they have to bring him back because like he's just like a total table setter. Like his walks are like he's not like a huge walker. I think he only has like around like a 10% walk rate, but like he doesn't strike out like you said, and he puts the ball in play. He's hitting over 300, and like his power is like doubles power, which Yankee Stadium the ball just like carries out. So
Yeah, and I mean, we saw the big hits that LeMahieu had, especially in that Indians wild card series where
yeah,
he got that base hit off of Brad Hand. He had the at bats a couple years ago in Houston when he hit that home run off of Ozuna. The same night, unfortunately, bad
yeah.
flashback for Yankee fans. The same night Altuve hit the home run off of Chapman, but I think he's certainly a guy that I would say the Yankees need more than the Mets because the Mets have some guys with power, but they have a guy like Dominic Smith who's going to hit over 300. McNeil's going to hit over 300. So I think the Yankees, when they're so power driven, they need that one guy to sort of shake it up a bit, like a guy like Bieber, who if he was rolling, which he wasn't in that wild card game, but if he's rolling, he's going to run right through guys with all those strikeouts he can rack up. But LeMahieu's a guy who throws off that rhythm a little bit. He'll make you throw 8, 9, 10 pitches, and if he strikes out, he strikes out. But it's not going to be a 3, 4, 5 pitch strikeout like you would normally see.
Yeah, plus you saw with Bieber too in game one when he faced DJ. Like DJ worked the count and then he just laced one to right field and then Judge hit the home run like first pitch. Like just total table setter for the lineup. And like while getting on base is nice and like I would love a leadoff walk, but I feel like a leadoff hit like sets the tone so much differently than a walk would.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And then when you have a guy like LeMahieu, there's things you can't measure with his at bats, like the amount he makes a pitcher have to work. Like when you look at a guy like Stanton, you know if you can execute that slider down and away, you're going to probably get him out a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Same thing with Judge. If you can execute that slider down and away, you're going to get him to swing and miss unless he's that hot at the plate where he's laying off of it. And LeMahieu, there's really no way to pitch him.
Yeah, and like the Yankees just need that bat, and like even if they move Torres to second, I still don't think Lindor is like a possible trade. Like realistically, like the Yankees trade pieces, just like don't have much value to them.
Yeah,
Like
and
I don't know.
that's a good transition to the next point where you have Garcia, who would definitely be a trade piece in any trade, especially for Lindor. But you're in a situation where you know Garrett Cole's coming back, but I believe Paxton is off the books, Tanaka's off the books,
Yeah.
and Herman, who knows what's going on with him. I mean, you have Montgomery still there. I still is Jay Happ got another year?
No, he's gone.
Happ is gone too. So they've got quite a few pieces to fill, and that's one of the biggest things that we saw with the Yankees not being able to win World Series is because when you look at the Astros series a couple years ago, they didn't have Herman. They didn't have him in the postseason. You
Yeah.
look at this season, they had to turn to Garcia, who Boone did not have enough confidence in to go more than one inning. So I think that's one of the biggest things that the Yankees are going to have to worry about. So if the Yankees, are they going to go with Tanaka for another year, or are they going to give Garcia the sort of pat on the back and say, we need you to step up and be this big time rotation starter that your prospect potential is shown?
Um, I think no matter what happens, the Yankees have to sign a starting pitcher. Would it be Tanaka or someone else? It's like even starting like a 3-4, because like beyond Cole, it's just a bunch of question marks. You know, like Severino, I think he should be back by opening day, but like he's injury history, and who knows what he'll be. Garcia is young. We don't know. Monty's still young, but like he's had inconsistency since he's been back since Tommy John. Clark Schmidt should be good, but again, we didn't really see him that much. So, like, the Yankees need to find innings somewhere. Bring back Tanaka, I think would be great. Like, he's been in New York for the past 7 years. Up until this year, he's been like dominant in the postseason, and he'll give you like 180 innings or so, which we just need desperately.
One of the guys I think the Yankees should consider is Odorizzi, who had a couple of seasons going well for him in Minnesota because he's got knowledge of the American League East and he's pitched in Yankee Stadium more times than probably anyone else who's on the market right now. And I don't think he obviously won't be expensive as Trevor Bauer, probably won't be as expensive as Charlie Morton was for the Braves. So I think that's a good piece to plug in there, especially if you want to sort of take the money you might have thrown towards a guy like Bauer, or if you would have thrown if Real Muto was an option, to bring those two in, Tanaka and Odorizzi, to sort of allow guys like Garcia and Severino and Montgomery to sort of take those 4 or 5, and if you want to have a 6th starter spot in the rotation, and then if they find out to be Severino's back to where he was, Garcia's looking like an ace, I think it gives you that depth that you might not have thought about before when you signed Odorizzi and Tanaka.
Yeah. Odorizzi also like he played with the Rays for a few years too, which like we probably mentioned before with the ALS experience, and I think he has like a same like pitch like mix than Tanaka does. Like, he has like the splitter especially and like the fastball that sits around like 93. So I think he'll be good in New York if he did come. But I think also Clark Schmidt, like I think he might be best suited for maybe like a bullpen option. Like if they use him just like a 2-3 inning guy at some point. I don't know how good he will be as a starter, but the Yankees need bullpen help, and like I think with like the stuff he has, like he'll be good for like 2 innings out of the pen.
Yeah, those swingman options are very important. I mean, Schmidt's one of those guys, and you can imagine he probably is going to make 5, 6, 7 starts just due to injury in a full season. And you can imagine maybe a guy like Michael King is another guy that they throw in
Yeah.
the bullpen as a swingman option as well. And I think that's another key thing because you look at a lot of these teams that have won the World Series over the last couple of seasons. You look at the 2020 Dodgers, they had a starting pitcher pitch their biggest innings in Julio Urias. They had in 2019,
Strasburg came out of the pen too.
Strasburg, Corbin were the first 2 guys that come to mind. When the Red Sox won the World Series, Nate Eovaldi. And when the Astros won it, they had Charlie Morton do a lot of that heavy lifting as well. So if the Yankees can keep those guys sort of dominant and keep them in the mix instead of having them sort of sit around in the minor leagues all season, they could end up finding someone who could come out of nowhere. And I think Severino can easily be that guy, a guy that maybe spends time both in the bullpen and in the rotation because they want to be cautious with his injury history.
Yeah.
He could be that guy. He's got the stuff to come in and be a 2, 3 inning guy that comes in when you don't really necessarily trust. You don't want to, I would say trust, but you don't want to use Chapman 3 out of 4 games in a series when you know he's getting older. And you saw how it affected him when he was a Cub. So imagine how it's going to affect him now that he's getting older.
Yeah, it's just overusing the bullpen in general. Like I feel like the Yankees, like they've always had like their 3-headed, 4-headed monster coming out of the back of the back pen. But like when it became August, came September, like you saw like Ottavino like started getting like roughed up, and then he was awful this year. Like Britton started getting a little shaky towards like September 19. Chapman started getting a little shaky towards the end. Like there's always like I know it's like always ups and downs with them, but like I feel like if all of them are going out there throwing like 75, 80 innings a year, then like come postseason, they're gonna be burnt out.
Yeah, that's another thing that the Yankees really do. I mean, Aaron Boone really likes to use the stat book a lot. I would say it's maybe like a cheaper version, a Walmart version of what the Tampa Bay Rays try to do in
Yeah.
terms of you saw it with Garcia in the playoffs. Not sort of let his pitchers go deeper than they have to, and at least in his opinion, deeper than they have to. And I think when you continue to trot these guys out there over and over again, they will feel it by the time October rolls around because they're not starting pitchers. They're relievers that if they were built to go 100 plus innings in a season, they would probably still be starting pitchers instead of working in the bullpen.
Yeah, definitely. I also thought with Paxton being a free agent, like he's coming off the injury, I thought his value might be down. So I assume like the Yankees, if they can get him for really cheap, just to see what he can do. Like I think that's something that they can definitely do for them.
Yeah, to me, he's a guy that I think, for at least my opinion, his better role would be transforming into what Andrew Miller has become when he was in the prime of his career, where he was a guy that was a failed starter. And I think Paxton's failure is more coming in
With his
injury,
health, yeah,
inability to stay healthy, because he's never thrown, I don't think, more than 160 innings in a single season. So he's got ace stuff, but he doesn't have the ace stamina or ability to stay healthy and produce those 180 innings, which is really the new 200 these days. But I think, I don't know if this will be the year he does it, but even if you get him cheap this year, you put him in the back of that rotation, and then he plays that maybe that Charlie Morton role, that Evaldi role when things get towards the postseason. But the biggest question I think for the Yankees have is Gary Sanchez. I mean, he's been pretty much a 200 hitter the last 3 seasons. While his defense has gotten slightly better, it's hard to survive with a catcher who, it's pretty much hit or miss. It's either home run, strikeout, or and he doesn't even walk that much. So it's really home run or strikeout with Gary Sanchez. What is the future with him? At least for me, looking at it from a Mets perspective, is that you sort of dangle him out there to teams this offseason, and you can get a steal of a trade, and it's not going to hurt you too much to get rid of him. I think you might be time to move on from him.
yeah. I think his like value right now is basically at like zero. So like that steal of a trade just probably won't happen. And like while he's like hitting like 200 and like it's like striking out a lot more than he was, like the power is still there. Like when it comes to catchers, like what catchers in the league are really giving out like great production? Like even like JT, like Grandal, like the top catchers, like none of them are putting out like monster seasons.
Right.
And then so I mean, like I think this is his last year of arbitration or second to last year. So like as long as they just keep him there, like I don't think Higashioka, like while I like him, I don't know how much production in a full season he'll give over Gary.
Yeah.
So I think this is Gary's last shot. I don't think he's gonna be traded. I think the Yankees are gonna stick with him for this season, and then if he's like not good, they'll probably DFA him or trade him like they did with Greg Bird like 2 years ago.
Yeah, Hickey, he had a good season. I mean, defensively and offensively, he was solid. He pretty much emerged to a guy who should be starting every day towards the end of the season. But with Sanchez, it's very interesting because you look at the inverse. You talked about the guys like Grandal and Real Muto, who usually in a full season, they're probably your all-star catchers, your best productive offensively. But on the inverse, we see guys like Zanino and Jeff Mathis who have been able to hang on to careers even though they can't really hit it all. And at least with Zanino, he gives you that premier blocking behind the plate. He's a very good pitch framer. And despite hitting 190, 180, whatever it is, he's like Sanchez, where it's going to give you that power, that unlimited power that they have. So I think the biggest thing that separates like a guy like Zanino and a guy like Gary Sanchez is just the defense, strictly defense. Sanchez still has that cannon for an arm, but it's that pitch framing. And does he get a little bit unlucky with the pitch framing, the blocking, because he's had to catch guys like Zach Britton? He's had to catch Tommy Kahnle. He's had to catch Chapman and Betances when he was still a Yankee. So it kind of makes it hard for any catcher to catch those guys. But I think for him, like we saw with the Mets with Travis d'Arnaud, he may just need a new scenery, a new change of place in order to revive his career a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think like the biggest thing too there with like the Zanino and Sanchez comparison is just like the team that they're on. Like like I think the Rays are more like power stricken than the Yankees are. So like a guy like Zanino, who's in like just hit a few home runs here or there, and it's like have like maybe like hit like a few sac flies or just like a few clutch hits to get in the postseason. Like they can afford that. Well, the Yankees, like a guy like Higashioka, like he might not have like the best numbers, but like the defense is there and he'll put the ball in play, which he did constantly
Yeah.
throughout September, which the Yankees do need.
Right, no doubt about that. So before we move on to a little Mets stuff here, what is your prediction for the type of deal LeMahieu is going to get and what team he ends up signing with this offseason?
I think I saw his agent wants like 5 years. I don't know if that's gonna happen. So, but he will get at least 4 years. I think it'll be maybe 4 years, 80 million with a player option for 500. And I don't see him going anywhere but New York. The Yankees, that is, not the Mets.
I think he's going to be a Yankee. I think what they're going to do is give him 5 years, but those last 2 years are going to be, I would say, player option years. I can't see LeMahieu accepting a deal that involves a team option, but I
Yeah,
think
no way.
it's going to be probably 5 years. Let's go 112 million. I think he's certainly deserved that. And a guy who hits the ball the opposite field so much, like LeMahieu, when you've got that right center field, from right center field to the foul pole at Yankee Stadium, it certainly helps out a guy like that. But that's going to be one of the more fun things to watch. So let's move on. Little Met stuff. And this was an interesting question because obviously with COVID, uh, we haven't made our trip back to see some of the baseball guys we played with. And not to mention, it's harder to talk about just stuff in person. But my interesting thing was what are Yankee fans sort of view on Steve Cohen's purchase of the Mets? Like, are they excited that finally the Mets and Yankees can sort of have a full rivalry of what it was in the mid to late 2000s when the Mets and Yankees were good at the same time? Is it something like I don't know, maybe a little fear of now the Mets can finally poach some players that the Yankees and Dodgers can only sign now? So I wonder what's the psyche of the Yankee fan right now.
Well, I know for like a Mets fan, this is like there's no better time for them to like be a Mets fan. Like it's definitely so exciting. Like as for us, like it will be fun to actually have like two like insanely like competitive New York teams and like have that like rivalry back, but like also like that fear because like I don't know. I think the Mets are gonna be like very dangerous in the years to come. Like they're gonna be ultra aggressive. Like they're gonna be like a powerhouse in free agency, especially in the next few years, with like, every team like being hurt from COVID. So like I don't know. I think Steve Cohen. Like I love him on Twitter. I'll tell you that. Like, but when I think the Mets will start making moves soon, and like that, like everyone laughing and seeing him on Twitter is gonna be like oh god, like he's about to just like tear up the league with like all the stuff he's gonna do.
Right. And yeah, with the Yankees, I mean, with the Yankees and the Mets, I think this is something the city, or not just city, New York really needs because look at LA. They've had a couple champions over the last couple of months. Boston has had a champion over the last year. So it's sort of like we're lagging behind. But before we used to be the city everyone looked up to, or it was just New York versus LA. I mean, the Jets and Giants aren't doing much, even though the Giants are somehow in a playoff race.
Yeah, I have no clue.
Um, you have the Islanders, who had a very good hockey season. They were just that close from getting to the Stanley Cup Finals. But the Rangers and Devils are both in a rebuilding phase. And when you look at basketball, the Nets are probably going to be good, but they haven't done anything. The Knicks, they won't be doing anything for the next half a decade. So when you can have two teams like this competing well at the same time, I think it brings the interest back into baseball, especially when all these teams are either lackluster or there's really no rivalry between anyone else in the city. And I think that's something that's really needed because we've seen baseball sort of, I want to say lose interest, but when you ask people in the city what their favorite sport is, you don't hear you don't hear baseball as much as you maybe hear basketball or football. It's really those sports that are sort of transforming into, especially basketball, it's really continued to blossom as the game of the city.
Yeah, totally. It'll be good to have like two teams that have a chance to win it all each year because like New York's been like falling short of championships as of late, and like Boston seemingly wins all the time, and like the West Coast is getting their championships. So like the Yankees needed like well, not the Yankees, but New York State needs a win. The Yankees definitely need one too. It's been a long time.
So let's talk about that Mets free agency. Obviously, this is the first time in years where you look at the Mets and you say they're in on anybody that has a free agent is a free agent, they're in on. So out of these sort of big four, I think the big four really to me are Real Muto, Bauer, Springer, and Ozuna. Out of those big four, how many do you think the Mets can actually get their hands on this offseason?
Realistically, I would say like 2 out of 4. Like I think Springer to the Mets is almost like a lock. Like I don't know. In my mind, like a 5-year, $125 million contract is like what he'll probably get.
Yeah, and that's my thing with Springer. A lot of people say, "Oh, he's not as good as a defender as he once was. He's sort of regressed to maybe average to pushing close to below average in center field." But again, I don't think those people watch Brandon Nimmo play, the 60 plus games, and then if you want to include 2019, those games in center field where he was, I don't want to say brutal, but he just doesn't look like a center fielder. He looks like a corner outfielder, and I can't imagine putting George Springer out there would leave the Mets in a worse position than playing Nimmo in center field would.
It would totally put them in a better spot. Plus, like, they just need someone in the outfield to kind of like mesh things together. Because I don't think the Mets have really had like a true center fielder since like Beltron left, whenever it was, you know. So I feel like he's like literally like a righty Beltron.
Yeah, they certainly need something like that. And here's another interesting question I sort of had when thinking about Springer, is that you have Springer, who's an elite leadoff hitter, all the home runs he hits in the leadoff spot. But then the Mets already have an elite leadoff hitter, but in a different way, in Brandon Nimmo, who gets on base at crazy amounts, who gets hit by pitches, who always works the count deep. If you're Luis Rojas, and I'll give you my answer after I hear yours, what are you doing with those two if they're both in the same lineup? Do you, and not to mention Jeff McNeil might also be in that 1-2 mix. How would you set up that sort of first couple of batters in the lineup if you had Springer on that roster?
Um, I think the way the Mets are constructed now, the only person that would replace Nimmo in that leadoff spot would be if they sign DJ. But if Springer's there, I think keep Nimmo there, and just make Springer better because, like you said, he sees a lot of pitches. Like sort of Springer, if he's behind Nimmo, like if he gets on base and he sees like 9 pitches, and like Springer's like locked and loaded, he'll be ready to like drive the ball anywhere. And Nimmo is pretty quick, so you can score on a double.
Yeah, and that's my thing too. You have a lot of people also may say, well, you can be up 1-0 more likely with Springer, but 1-0's nice. But if you get Nimmo on base to lead off the game, then you have to contend with McNeil and Alonso and Smith and Springer, not in that order. But those are four guys that have all played at all-star levels. Dominic Smith would have been an all-star this year if it was more than a 60-game season. You can have almost a guaranteed guy on base, or if you look at Brandon Nimmo's career on base, almost 40% of the time you're going to have a guy on base when those guys are coming up. I think it makes your lineup deeper. And at the end of the day, one of the things the Mets struggled with was getting runners home. And when you put a guy on base with no outs, just simple math tells you it's going to make it easier to get him in, especially when you have the meat of the order right behind that.
Yeah, and also I just think that like Springer just like his power plays too, like scoring, you can score 2 runs instead of one. Um, he's more of like a gap hitter. Like he can drive Nimmo in, and I think Nimmo's a really good base runner.
Mm-hmm.
Like Springer, like he's had like some low leg history, like leg injury history, which I don't know if that'll prevent him from stealing, but I just think Nimmo overall is like the better leadoff guy, especially with the way the Mets might be like playing the lineup.
Right, and that's one of the things that you just brought up a good point. That's one of the things that the Mets sort of lack. That they have guys who can drive in a ton of runs and get on base, like Smith and Alonso and McNeil and Nimmo. But Nimmo's really the only one in the lineup, and you can say Rosario as well. But he wasn't hitting enough to consistently play every day. And the Mets didn't have that speed on the bases where it might not translate to stealing bases, but it allows guys to move from first to third or score from first on a double or score from second on a single where you may be getting hits with runners in scoring position. And I saw this with the Mets plenty last year where you get hits with runners in scoring position and then they don't score or a guy doesn't go from first to third. So instead of having first and third and one out, you're first and second with one out. And instead of a fly ball getting a run in, you don't get anything out of it because of your sort of lack of speed, your ability. So I think to me, that's one of the biggest things that can make the Mets a better team. So whether it's a guy like Springer or whether it's a guy like Rosario hitting better, I think anytime you can get more speed on the bases, despite what you said about Springer's leg injuries, even if he's not stealing bases, I think when you can have that ability to move first to third and have very good base runners, I think that allows you to sort of fix some of those runners in scoring position issues that we saw the Mets have last season.
Yeah, and you can't forget about Jimenez too. I think honestly he should be playing shortstop over Rosario.
Yeah, and that
Like,
yeah, I'll let you continue with that. That's our next point here. What do you do with this sort of triangle? I guess you can throw Lindor in this triangle of options that the Mets have with Rosario, Jimenez, and Lindor.
well, I guess first with Lindor, since he's the only one not on the team. But if the Mets were to trade for him, like I would think Rosario would be included with that. He's probably, or him or JD Davis are probably the most valuable pieces, especially since the Indians love their major league talent.
Yeah,
But I think for the Mets, I don't think they should go after Lindor only because like the Indians for sure are not going to sign him, like extend him, and he's going to be a free agent. So with the Mets' money, they can definitely just buy him next season, especially with it's like what next season is like Lindor, Correa, Seager, Baez, and one of Trevor Story. All five of them are free agents next year. So
exactly. And I think if you're the Mets, you want to take that 1 year and see if Rosario can at least put him not in that same class, because if he did, it would be great. But
yeah,
if Rosario can put himself at the class right below that and keep trending like he was in 2019 towards being at that level, I think that's one of the biggest things. And I don't know if you've seen, but Rosario has been doing a little hitting work during the offseason with the hitting coach that revived or allowed Justin Turner to access that power that he's accessed since he left the Mets. So I think that's another thing you'd want to see, that if Rosario can access that power, I think that's a big thing that the Mets can use, because he can play average defense or slightly above average defense. But if he's hitting 270, 280, and he's giving you 20 bombs and about 35 to 40 doubles, I mean, that's close to at least over a 500 slugging percentage from your shortstop.
yeah, which is like all you can ask for nowadays. But and if Rosario doesn't work out, like Jimenez, I think he's a stud. Like he's like freakishly athletic and like he's gonna make all those plays. And if he can even hit like 250, like he's gonna steal like 20 bags.
Yeah, and that's where he sort of gets the leg up on him, because he can steal bases at a better clip than Rosario ever has.
And the
And it's interesting.
defense.
Yeah, it's a defense too. Rosario took him about 2, 3 years to get his defense really going at an average level. Jimenez, it came up and it was natural. And with the base stealing, Rosario, the Mets have been trying to get him to learn how to steal bases for years, years and years and years. He still hasn't figured out how to do it. And meanwhile, Jimenez came up, and I believe he was like 7 of 8. And after he got thrown out or picked off his first time, he was 7 of 7, 7 in a row after that. So I think that gives him the leg up where he can say, you know what, he's only hitting 250, he's not hitting a lot of home runs, but he's playing Gold Glove caliber defense. I think with the pitchers the Mets sort of have, when you have DeGrom, Stroman, and even Syndergaard, who if healthy is another ground ball guy, Peterson, another guy, you want those ground balls that it's not those ground balls that are hit to him, it's those ground balls that are those ones in the hole, the ones up the middle that become outs instead of base hits. And I think that's what sort of gives Jimenez a leg up over Rosario at the moment.
Yeah, I just think they should have him like use this year as like a like developmental year for Jimenez because like for what you said, and because the Mets don't need like another bat in their lineup. You know, like they already have like an insanely lethal lineup as is. So if you can just have him in there and he can just hit you singles and doubles and he plays at like elite defense, I think that'll be a lot more helpful for them as a team than Rosario's like offense.
Right, and that's another good point where when you look at a lineup and you look at a guy like Jimenez on a team like, say, the Orioles, who need production from the middle of their lineup, no, you may want to be a little more cautious. But if you put him in the Mets lineup, more than likely he's batting eighth. And what's the job of an eighth hitter? Hit 250, play good defense, steal those 25, 30 bases. But I think the Mets can put him in that eight hitter position. He really is going to thrive a little bit. But the Mets sort of put themselves in this little, I guess, situation where Jimenez played so much in this past season, where now you're going to have to go into spring training and you have to figure out, is keeping Rosario playing there every day going to be good? Is sending Jimenez back down to AAA going to stunt his growth? Or is keeping him in the big leagues going to do the same thing? So let's just do a hypothetical and say Rosario is your everyday shortstop coming out of spring training in 2021. Is Jimenez a guy that the Mets should keep in AAA, or should they leave him to sort of play that utility role on the big league level?
I guess like this first question to ask for me is like, is he versatile? Like I'm assuming he can play other positions if he's like
Yeah,
maybe second base or
yeah.
something.
Second and third is he also played last season.
So I mean, I think there's no reason not to have him on the bench then. Like even if he just uses like a defensive sub for Rosario or just like a pinch runner, like I think both those like places for him would be like super helpful for them. And I guess like I feel like the DH, like, is it confirmed coming back for the National League? I feel like that's like a huge like
Yeah,
thing from the Mets.
they haven't even said anything about it yet. Usually we know by now what in the world's going on, but they haven't said anything. Everyone's leaning, I think, towards the DH not being involved in the National League for 2021. But again, as a Mets fan, it doesn't matter for Yankees fans or American League fans, but for the Mets fans, you more than want to see either Alonso and Smith in that DH role. But
Yeah,
no clue right now.
yeah. I don't honestly just don't get why some people still want to have the pitcher hit. Like I feel like in like the modern like baseball like world, like pitchers don't focus on hitting like at all, and there's no point of seeing like a 180 hitter. It's like having Gary Sanchez at the plate for a pitcher in every team.
And that's one of the things I've sort of come around to as well. Maybe a couple years ago, if you would have asked me, I would have said I prefer the pitchers get a chance to hit. But if you look at the pitchers these days in spring training, even it's not just the pitchers themselves. They don't teach them how to bunt anymore. They don't really care about hitting anymore. You look at the college level, you don't have many pitchers that are able to play center field, play shortstop, and also pitch at the same time. They really make guys do only one these days
Yeah,
because
that them
everything
specialize.
specialized. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think draws back from it. If pitchers aren't even going to have the effort to learn how to sacrifice bunt, I think you might as well just add the offense to the game and create 15 more jobs for guys who maybe
Deserve to be there.
dealing with injuries. Guys like Alonso who aren't terrific fielders, but they're going to hit you 40 home runs if right. So I think that's another thing that the MLB and the Players Association should agree on. But I think it's something that the owners are sort of holding over their heads as another sort of meaningless tactic. But Steve Cohen is, we talked about him earlier. He's all in, and I think Sandy Alderson is all in with the designated hitter as well.
Yeah, like it just saves the pitchers too. Like I've seen some pitchers just like get injured from just running the base pass. Like I remember I was at a Subway Series game like 2-3 years ago, and Tanaka somehow pulled both his hamstrings running the bases. I'm just like, how does that even happen?
Yeah, or even more Ching-Ming Wang when he got
Yeah,
injured.
basically ended his career.
Yeah, he was never the same after
No.
that injury. So I think that's another big thing to worry about. And if you're like the Yankees, the last thing you want to see is Garrett Cole pull a hamstring like Tanaka did when
Yeah.
you only play a handful or a couple dozen of interleague games in a full season. Last thing you want to do is take that risk with the guy who you've invested $300 million into. So we're moving to our last thing before we end it here. We're both big fans of MLB the Show. Um, it's to me, it's the best game that is on the PlayStation. I mean, a lot of people are gonna love, their GTA, their Call of Duty, even 2K for a sports game as well. But to me, MLB The Show has been terrific ever since they've released it back in '06. Every year, they don't disappoint. So to me, I'm excited to see what's going to happen on the PS5. We haven't heard much about it. We've only heard really Cold War stuff, GTA, obviously for the third generation of
Yeah,
consoles
it's
coming back
insane.
again.
Game won't die.
Yeah, but uh, what are your sort of expectations or sort of things on your wish list that you want to see in MLB 21, the show on the PS5?
I mean, as terms of like a core gameplay, like I think it's like really good as is. Like my to-do list or like wish list is very nitpicky. Like for example, like I want them to have like the ability to actually extend players in franchise mode or something. Like I just hate how I just can't do that during like the regular season.
Yeah,
It's like
I definitely I think so as well, and I think that's why I asked this question to you, because I think we both like to nitpick these games like this. We like to get, especially in franchise, because that's what both of us spend a lot of our time playing on. At least for me, one of the biggest things is, can we get that owner mode? Taking some of those things from MVP baseball when they brought that owner mode, the
yeah,
MVP mode.
customized stadiums and stuff.
And I know the developers have said making a stadium is one of the hardest things for them to do, which is why we see those same minor league stadiums every single year for them. But just having some sort of creativity, I mean, even if it's something as simple as what the college game had for MVP baseball, where you make the own fences, you pick from like one of 7 backgrounds they give you, even something as simple as that, and then building onto it, I think is something that not just franchise mode, but imagine in Diamond Dynasty, you can play in all these stadiums. And like, I don't know if you ever played this game, but the golf club, they let you design your own courses and you can download and play them. So imagine doing those sort of things in MLB The Show. I think the PlayStation 5 gives them plenty of capability to do it.
Yeah, not even that, just like other games too. Like I know like Black Ops 3, Skyrim, like they allow mods to be in the game, but not like mods that like make you like crazy good, but like in offline you can like play people like when I play with Black Ops 3 like or even Skyrim, like these guys make these like insanely good mods. Like they make their own maps and they do all this stuff. So like if they allow like creative freedom from people who play the game, I'm sure they can make like cool stadiums and like cool sounds and other things that make the game more lively. Um, and then like another thing too is like they added it in MLB the Show 20, but I like how they started to increase the skill gap. Like on defense, they made the like the meter for throwing, and like I think more things in that direction to make the game harder and like more rewarding for when you put hours into it. That would definitely make online play a lot better.
Yeah, and I think what is big for that skill gap on defense is that sometimes you're playing and you'll see, like, I don't know who's a butcher at first base. Like you see David Ortiz playing first base in one of your Diamond Dynasty season games, and he can't field. But since most first basemen have this most of the same animations, especially those ground balls to first base on double plays, no matter who you put over there, if it's a guy who has a primary position at first base, he's going to make it look like he's Keith Hernandez, he's Don Mattingly out there. No matter who
Zips
it
it
is.
across. Yeah.
And it's always the pitcher coming over to cover. They make it look like it's easy. So I think what they'll be able to put a little more of those animations in there so that guys like there's a good defensive first baseman now.
Matt Olson.
Yeah, there you go. Matt Olson, he has those slick fielding. Like Matt Chapman at third base, he can make plays that JD Davis at third base can't. Not to say that JD Davis should be throwing the ball into the stands every time you field with him, but that extra 3 to 4 or 5 tenths of a second that Chapman can make up because of how terrific he is on defense. That's one of the biggest things that I think is going to help make the game better, because in 2K, I mean, you see everyone has their own jump shots, but only a couple guys really you can notice. Like you see this guy dribbling, like, oh yeah, that's the way Kevin Durant dribbles. That's how LeBron James dribbles. Like you want to see that same sort of individuality between every single player when you have those high skill levels. A guy like Baez too, with those slick tags and all the stuff he made. They put some of that in in this year's game, but you want to see that throughout everybody.
Yeah, and I think doing that too would make the game more diverse because like when you play like Diamond Dynasty, like you see the same like 5, 10 players on every single team. Like it would be nice to have people who are like more contact hitters like in there somewhere, or that's like actually play good defense. Because like I see like if you go on like the Diamond Dynasty store and you look at someone like Brooks Robinson, he's like an average hitter, like one of the best defenders ever. He goes for like 5,000 subs, but like I know like Mike Schmidt might be the best example because he can hit and field. He'll go for like 400,000 because he has like that 95 power plus, and that's what everyone uses. So I think they should find a way to like make people who put the ball on the ground or just put the ball like on line drives like more usable. Because like Jeff McNeil and like DJ LeMahieu, like both of them are like bat the ball guys, but they're basically unusable in that game.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the things that we have talked about. How we get frustrated because you use LeMahieu, I use McNeil, and they're pretty much unusable because you don't get any power with them, or when you score up a ball.
Spread at people all the time too.
So I think if they can implement launch angle a little bit more, because right, Alonso may have like a 14 degree launch angle, 15 degrees, and those balls are going to fly. But maybe McNeil's launch angle is a little more for a line drive, and if he comes off the bat at 100, 102 miles an hour, it could result in the double in the gap, a triple, instead of having it just be a long fly ball that results in the out. So I think if they can figure that out, guys like Tony Gwynn become a lot more usable in Diamond Dynasty. Who has Rod Carew? Um, was Juan Pierre in this year's game?
I don't know.
I think he might have been last year.
I think they might have added like a 91 overall card for him.
Yeah,
like,
but
somewhere on there.
a guy like Juan Pierre, or even if they a guy like Wade Boggs too.
Yeah, Boggs, guys, Henderson.
Yeah,
exactly.
Ozzy. Yeah, those guys are very, very vital parts of baseball. They're not. It's not just power. I know home runs are being hit at a crazy rate, but make those contact hitters, the guys who hit 300, even the guy like Donovan Solano. I imagine if you used him in Diamond Dynasty this year, you wouldn't be doing too much damage with him because he's very limited in his power.
Yeah, so and it totally. And like the last thing too I can think of is I just hate how like no matter who it is in the field, like constantly they throw the ball and the first baseman has to like pick it out of the dirt. Like it seems like every single throw, I'm like, oh my god.
Yep. That sometimes they kind of overdo it with the realism. So it's like finding that balance of what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, like I think like if they had like a diamond or gold fielder, like maybe the ball bounces like 10%, 15% of the time. Like a bronze would be like 20%. Like just like different changes, but like make it like I feel like it should be more worth getting like a diamond defensive player too. Like I feel like I can put like a bronze player in there and he can make half the plays a diamond player can. So
yeah, exactly.
I think more emphasis on defense overall would make the game much more fun and frustrating. But I mean, like I think having that skill gap would be like make the games like more enjoyable.
Yeah, that's a good point because again, you can survive with like a bronze third baseman because most of the time the game is decided on whoever's going to hit the most home runs anywhere, who's going to hit the most home runs with guys on base. That's really all it's decided upon at the end of the day. And there's so many strikeouts that you produce in that game anyway. So it doesn't play that much of a difference anyway. So that is it for our first edition of our sort of YouTube. We'll call it a little bit of a vlog, I guess. I know Alexis had given that sort of the name. So we'll come up with a name for it. But I want to thank Mike for joining us. Of course, we'll have a cycle of guests come on. So we'll see Mike again at a future date. I'll have a couple other people join as well. But again, thank you. And please give us a follow on our social medias, our Facebook, all that good stuff.